The mystery behind. This 1923 family photograph remained unsolved for generations until now. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of the Chicago Historical Society's archive room, casting long shadows across the polished wooden tables. Dr. Michelle Torres carefully lifted the aged photograph from its protective sleeve, her gloved hands trembling slightly as she studied the sepia-toned image that had captivated her for weeks. 5 people stood in a formal pose against the backdrop of what appeared to be a modest home on the south side of Chicago. The year was 1923, printed neatly on the back in faded ink. A dignified older couple stood at the center, the father in a pressed suit, the mother in a high-necked dress with careful embroidery. Flanking them were 3 grown children, 2 sons and a daughter, all dressed in their Sunday finest. At first glance, they appeared to be a typical African-American family of the 1920s, prosperous enough to afford professional photography. But something in the photograph had puzzled Michelle since she first discovered it in her grandmother's attic 3 months ago. The eldest son, standing on the father's right, looked different from his siblings. His skin showed a patchwork of light and dark areas, creating an almost map-like pattern across his face and hands. The contrast was stark, even in the faded sepia tones, as if he existed between 2 worlds. Michelle leaned closer, studying the young man's face. Despite the unusual pigmentation, his features were unmistakably those of his family, the same strong jawline as his father, the same high cheekbones as his mother. But his eyes held something different, a profound sadness mixed with defiant dignity. "Dr. Torres?" A voice interrupted her concentration. James Wilson, the archive's senior curator, approached with documents. "I found the census records you requested, the Johnson family, South Side, 1920 and 1930. Michelle accepted the papers eagerly. For 3 months, she had been trying to understand the story behind this photograph. Her grandmother, dying at 97, had whispered fragmented memories about Uncle Samuel, who looked like a patchwork quilt. The census records confirmed Robert and Dorothy Johnson, along with their children, Samuel, age 28, Marcus, age 25, and Helen, age 22. But in the 1930 census, Samuel's name had vanished completely. Michelle picked up the photograph again, studying Samuel's face with renewed intensity. Whatever had happened to him, she was determined to uncover it. Michelle spread the contents of her grandmother's trunk across her apartment floor. Letters, newspaper clippings, and faded receipts formed a mosaic of the Johnson family's life in 1920s Chicago. The autumn wind rattled the windows as she worked late into the night. She picked up a brittle envelope postmarked June 1924. The letter inside was written in elegant cursive, addressed to "My dearest mother and father," and signed "Your son, Samuel." "The condition continues to spread despite Dr. Wilson's treatments," Michelle read aloud. "My hands are now half transformed, and I can no longer hide it when I work at the shop. Mr. Henderson dismissed me yesterday. He said customers were uncomfortable, that they whispered about disease. I see the fear in people's eyes, Mama, and no explanation seems to ease it." Michelle's medical background immediately suggested vitiligo, a condition causing loss of skin pigment in patches. For a black man in 1920s Chicago, it carried implications far beyond appearance. She searched through medical journals from the 1920s. What she found went beyond medical descriptions. Articles warned of social complications in the Negro population, the confusion it might cause in racial classification. A 1922 research paper made her pause. "Patient S.J., male, 26 years old, progressive vitiligo affecting approximately 40% of visible skin. Patient reports loss of employment, social isolation, and threats from both white and colored communities." The initials, the age, the timeline. It had to be Samuel. Her phone rang. It was Dr. Raymond Foster, a dermatologist colleague. "Michelle, I found Samuel Johnson in Cook County Hospital files from 1921 to 1929. The physician's notes are heartbreaking. Starting in 1925, there are notes about social interventions and recommendations that the patient consider relocation to avoid racial complications." Michelle downloaded the scanned documents. One entry from 1926 stood out. "Patient expresses fear of violence from white citizens who may perceive him as attempting to pass, an equal fear of rejection from his own community. Patient became visibly distressed, stating he cannot live as a ghost." Samuel hadn't just been dealing with a medical condition. He'd been caught in an impossible situation, his body becoming dangerous in a society obsessed with clear racial boundaries. Evelyn Thompson's voice crackled through Michelle's phone speaker. At 92, calling from a Detroit nursing home, she was Marcus Johnson's daughter, one of the few who remembered hearing about the uncle who disappeared. "My father spoke about Uncle Samuel only once that I recall," Evelyn said carefully. "I was maybe 14, and I'd found an old photograph in the attic. When I asked Papa who the man with the spotted skin was, he got this look like I'd opened a wound. He told me to put it away and never speak of it." Michelle sat in her office, recording every word. Outside, November rain matched her racing heartbeat. "Did he ever tell you what happened to Samuel?" A long pause. "Years later, when Papa was dying in 1982, he told me something. The morphine loosened his tongue about things he'd kept locked away. He said Samuel was the smartest of all of them, wanted to be a lawyer to fight for civil rights. But the vitiligo took all that away." "How?" "Papa said that in those days, being black meant knowing your place, knowing where you belonged. The South Side was their world. But Samuel's skin kept changing. By 1925, he looked half white, half black, and that terrified everyone." Michelle leaned forward. "Why would that terrify them?" "Child, you have to understand what it was like. If white folks saw Samuel and thought he was white, then found out he lived in a black neighborhood, there could be violence, real violence. And if black folks thought he was trying to pass, that was its own betrayal. Samuel was trapped." The weight settled over Michelle. Samuel's body had made him dangerous to everyone he loved. "Papa said the last time he saw Samuel was Christmas 1928. The family gathered, trying to pretend everything was normal, but Samuel sat in the corner, barely speaking. 2 weeks later, he was gone. Just a note saying he couldn't stay, that his presence put everyone at risk." Michelle studied the photograph with new understanding. This wasn't just a man with a medical condition. This was someone watching his entire life dissolve. "Mrs. Thompson, do you know where he went?" "Papa mentioned Detroit once, but he never knew for sure. They never heard from him again." The Greyhound bus rumbled through darkness as Michelle traveled to Detroit. She'd spent 2 weeks following leads. A death certificate in Wayne County had caught her attention. Samuel Robert Johnson, Negro male, age 64, died March 15, 1959. The dates aligned perfectly. If this was the same Samuel, he had lived another 31 years after disappearing, dying alone in a city where no one knew his story. Patricia Coleman, archivist at the Detroit Historical Museum, waited in the research library. "After you called, I started digging through Ford Motor Company employment records. I found this." She handed Michelle a personnel file. Samuel R. Johnson, hired January 1929 as a janitor at River Rouge plant. The identification photograph showed an older Samuel, his face thinner and worn. The vitiligo had progressed significantly, but his eyes still held that mixture of sadness and dignity. "He worked there for 30 years, Patricia said quietly. "Consistent attendance, no disciplinary issues. But there's something else." She opened another folder containing incident reports. In 1934, Samuel was attacked by 3 white workers who accused him of trying to pass for white. He was hospitalized for a week with broken ribs and a concussion. When Ford investigated, several black workers defended him, explaining about his vitiligo. The white workers were fired, but Samuel requested transfer to the night shift. Michelle felt tears stinging her eyes. Even in a new city, Samuel couldn't escape the violence his condition provoked. "Did he have any friends? Family here?" Patricia shook her head. "That's what's tragic. I searched church rolls, social clubs, neighborhood directories. Samuel appears nowhere except employment records and his death certificate. He lived like a ghost for 3 decades. There must be something else." Patricia hesitated, then pulled out a final document. A letter, found in his boarding house after he died. The landlady kept it with his possessions, thinking someone might claim them. No one ever did. The letter was titled, "To Whoever Finds This," dated December 25th, 1958, 3 months before Samuel's death. Michelle sat alone in the museum's reading room. The letter spread before her. Patricia had given her privacy, understanding the sacredness of this moment. "I'm writing this on Christmas Day, alone in my room as I have been for 30 years of Christmas days," Samuel had written. "I'm 64 years old, and I have lived more than half my life as a stranger to myself and to the world. I write this so that someone, someday, might understand what it means to exist between categories that society insists must be absolute." Michelle read slowly, absorbing every word. Samuel described his life in Detroit with acceptance and quiet grief. He wrote about factory work, the endless repetition requiring no interaction, no explanation. "I chose the night shift because darkness erases distinctions. In dim light at 2 a.m., no one looks closely at skin color. I mop floors, empty trash, clean machinery. The work is honest, and it asks nothing except my labor." But Samuel revealed more than survival. He wrote about the library he visited every Sunday, the only public space where he felt safe. There he educated himself, reading law, history, philosophy. "I would have been a lawyer. I see that alternate life sometimes, like a ghost walking beside me. I see myself in a courtroom, fighting for justice. But that Samuel Johnson died in Chicago in 1928. I am what remains, a man who has learned to be invisible." The letter described the 1934 attack in detail. Samuel wrote about lying in the hospital, listening to nurses whisper. "The colored one who thinks he's white," they said. They could not conceive that I had never tried to pass, that I had never wanted to be anything other than what I was born to be, Samuel wrote. My skin changed without my permission. I'm still a Negro man. I'm still my father's son. But no one sees that. He described his careful, solitary life. A small church where he sat in the back. A boarding house run by a widow who asked only for rent. The same routes, the same stores, existing in the margins. I have not spoken to my family since 1928. I wonder if they are still alive, if Marcus married, if Helen had children. I wonder if my mother ever forgave me for leaving. Samuel's letter continued, revealing a life more complex than Michelle imagined. While isolated, he hadn't been entirely disconnected from the world. In 1935, I met a man named Jacob at the library, Samuel wrote. He was a Jewish immigrant, a tailor who had fled Germany. He too understood what it meant to be marked as other. We formed an unlikely friendship, built on silence and understanding. We would sit together, reading, saying little. It was enough. Michelle discovered Patricia had found records of Jacob Stein, a tailor operating a shop on Detroit's east side from 1933 until 1956. The shop's ledgers showed regular entries for S. Johnson, suggesting Samuel had been a steady customer. Jacob taught me to sew, Samuel's letter continued. He said every man should know how to repair what is broken. He meant clothes, but I understood the deeper meaning. Some things cannot be repaired, only endured. Through the 1930s and 40s, Samuel did small tailoring jobs for factory workers, mending clothes and altering suits. Work he could do alone in his room. The money bought books, allowed him small dignity. Jacob died 2 years ago. I attended his funeral, standing at the back of the synagogue, the only colored person present. His son thanked me for coming. He said his father had called me a man of great strength and greater sorrow. I did not know how to respond. The letter revealed another relationship with Dr. Thomas Wright, one of Detroit's few black physicians. Samuel had begun seeing him in 1940, not for vitiligo treatment, but for general care and something deeper. Dr. Wright has become a confidant. He is the only person who knows my full story. He has urged me to reconnect with my family, offered to help. But I cannot. Too many years have passed. I would be a stranger now. The letter's final pages revealed that in 1950, Samuel began volunteering at a home for elderly colored residents, helping with maintenance every Saturday. The elderly residents do not fear me. Perhaps they have lived long enough to see beyond surface appearances. There is a woman named Mrs. Clara, 91, who calls me the Patchwork Angel. She says I remind her that God makes all kinds of beautiful things. Michelle's search for Dr. Thomas Wright's records led to his grandson, Dr. Marcus Wright, a retired physician in Detroit's Palmer Woods. When she explained her research, there was a long pause. Samuel Johnson, my grandfather spoke about him, said he was one of the most remarkable men he'd ever known. Come to my house. I have something you need to see. Dr. Marcus Wright's study was lined with medical texts and family photographs. He pulled out a leather-bound journal from a locked cabinet. My grandfather kept detailed notes on certain patients, observations about their lives, their struggles. Samuel Johnson has an entire section. The first entry read, December 3rd, 1940. New patient, Samuel Johnson, age 46. Immediately noted advanced vitiligo, affecting approximately 85% of visible skin. Patient's affect is guarded, speech educated. Upon questioning, revealed he is from Chicago, lived in Detroit 11 years, has no family contact. When I asked why he sought care after so long, he said, I'm tired of being invisible, even to myself. I sense profound isolation beyond his physical condition. The entries chronicled not just Samuel's health, but his psychological state, his fears, rare moments of hope. Dr. Wright had become Samuel's advocate, counselor, perhaps his only real friend. March 15th, 1942. Samuel spoke today about his brother Marcus, wondered if he married, has children. I urged him to write a letter. He refused, stating he died to his family in 1928, and it would be cruel to resurrect that grief. June 22nd, 1945. The war has ended. Samuel tried to enlist in 1942, but was rejected. The recruiter couldn't determine his race classification for segregated units. He said it was final proof he belongs nowhere. Michelle read through years of entries, watching Samuel age through Dr. Wright's observations, physical ailments, but also notes about his inner life. He had memorized poetry, could recite legal precedents, had opinions on politics that impressed Dr. Wright. November 8th, 1955. Samuel brought me a book today, a first edition of The Souls of Black Folk by Du Bois. He'd been saving for 3 years. Inside, he wrote, To the only man who sees me whole. I was moved to tears. Dr. Marcus Wright set down his grandfather's journal and pulled out a small wooden box. After Samuel died, my grandfather was one of few people at his funeral. Maybe 10 people there. Factory workers, the widow who ran his boarding house, elderly people from the home where he volunteered. My grandfather said it was the saddest funeral he'd ever attended because each person knew only a fragment of who Samuel truly was. Michelle listened as Dr. Wright continued. My grandfather paid for Samuel's burial in Woodlawn Cemetery. He couldn't bear the thought of a pauper's grave, and he kept some of Samuel's belongings. He opened the box, revealing wire-rimmed reading glasses, letters tied with string, a worn copy of Langston Hughes's poetry, and a photograph. Michelle gasped. The same 1923 family photograph, but this copy was more worn, edges frayed from countless handlings. He carried this for 30 years, Dr. Wright said softly. When they went through Samuel's